Hi. Just welcome you here. I'm filming this today from Esalen Rumsen territory in what is now known as Carmel by the Sea in Central Coast of California, United States, or Turtle Island. So I'm going to just share a little bit about my identity. And I'm doing this because I'm doing this for myself, I guess. I'm doing this because it's really hard for folks to understand my identity, or what it means, or to them, or what it means to the way they've been thinking about the world. And so I'm sharing what I'm learning about my identity for the benefit of myself to start. I guess, I was listening to somebody talk this morning, and somebody I really admire, and he said, all I can do is speak my truth, and if folks don't like it, they can leave. So that's what this today is about. So thank you to this person for reminding me of that this morning, and giving me the courage to film after about a year of not sharing much publicly. So anyway, I go by she, her, and my name is Maija West. My birth or maiden name was Blaufus from my dad's side, and I'm half Latvian, a little bit more than half Latvian, and then German descent on my dad's side. And so my mom comes from the Latvian people, who is a small country on the Baltic Sea, sandwiched between Estonia to the north and Lithuania to the south, and kind of crowned by those countries north of them, Sweden, Finland, etc., and Norway. But it's a bit of a blind spot in Europe, but it's kind of suiting because I've been having to explain who I am and where I'm from my whole life. So the Latvians today in the country, there's only about 1.9 million folks, and they were incredibly displaced and impacted by World War II, and a third of their population either perished or were deported or fled. And so that's a pretty small country today. And so I'm a dual citizen of Latvia, and so is my daughter, and we just went through that process. It took us about 5 years, and I'm 48 now, and I really have been humbled by how hard it has been to recover my heritage during this lifetime. I was born in the Northern Sierra, and there weren't many Latvians around besides, my mom and my family. And so I didn't really understand what was my mom just teaching me what she decided she wanted to teach me, or what was Latvian. And so I really spent the last few years trying to figure that out. And so today I really want to share a little bit about what I've learned about my people, about why I am doing peacemaking today. And so I'll do that in the form of 4 little stories. The first story is about the Baltic Way. And so what I'll say about this is that the Baltic Way was a massive historical nonviolent protest that happened in 1989, in August of 1989. It might have been the 25th. And it was a movement that was that came out after decades of occupation by Russia, the USSR as it was called at the time, but before that, the Latvians have been occupied for hundreds of years, and they are the original inhabitants, along with the Livonians, of the lands of Latvia for thousands of years. And but then they've been occupied quite a bit by the Germans and the Russians since. And so they have a lot of resilience. But the thing that I really have appreciated about the Latvians is they really, really model unity, that we go together or we don't go at all. And I really, really, really feel that core value in my life and the challenges of that and also the benefits of that. And so the Baltic Way was a demonstration of that. It was the Latvians, the Lithuanians, and the Estonians joining hands, 2 million people across the 3 countries, sometimes linking arms to signal both their resistance to the occupation, but also their unity with each other and their shared experience as people of the Baltics. And so the Baltic Way continues to inspire me, and I was really lucky. I got to bring my daughter back to Latvia the first time I'd ever been there myself, and I brought my daughter for the 30th year of the anniversary of the occupation's end, which, for many people is the Baltic Way. So on the 30th anniversary of the Baltic Way, I was able to go home to my mom's homelands, to my homelands, and bring my daughter with me, and began my reconnection in the summer of 2019 on the summer solstice, or Ligua, which is an important holiday for the Latvians. And it was powerful to get to experience that resistance and that resilience. And I went to the Occupation Museum, which was being restored at the time, so it was kind of like basically in a room with like some photos up. It didn't have everything, and I went back later, but the thing that struck me the most was the photos of the men and women holding linden boughs and oak branches and flowers, and wearing their traditional clothing in the face of guns and tanks. And so, that it was about the unity among these 3 occupied peoples, but also it was about what's the source of strength and resilience that's going to help us overcome our fear and give us the courage. And it's to literally hold nature in our arms and to wear our traditions on our bodies to help give us the strength. And so I'm just honoring that story, and how much that really helped me start understanding what it meant to be a peacemaker, coming from these people. And then the second story is about cultural preservation. The Latvians are very proud to participate in something called the Latvian Song and Dance Festival. And Lithuania has this too. I don't know about Estonia, but the Latvians celebrated 150 years of these festivals. And it's hard to even fathom, but if you can imagine, there's tens of thousands of people all singing songs about nature together, singing songs about nature. Nature as a source of inspiration, of teachings, of the natural laws, of reminders, of seasonal cycles of things. Anyway, it's really powerful. And then it's, of course, the unity again, like everybody getting together in the same, in the circle. But, in the Song and Dance Festival, there's like 5 regions or, tribes, depending on who's talking about the language of Latvian, and all of these different regions or districts are represented through the traditional clothing and certain ways of expressing yourself. And yet there's this massive orchestrated dance that's going on, and these massive coordinations around songs that happen every 5 years. And so for the last 150 years in Latvia, this has been going on in different forms, even under the occupation by USSR. And somehow, that continued or was allowed, or they did it anyway. I don't know that part of the story. But for those who fled Latvia, like my mom during World War II, people went all over, the world. And they ended up in Australia and United States and other places. And then they started doing those festivals on those different continents as well. And so here in the US, the Latvian Song and Dance Festival has gone on 75 years, which means 15 festivals once every 5 years for 75 years. And those might be like almost correct, but I think I got that right. And I got to go to my first one here in the United States in St. Paul, Minnesota last summer. And it was really important. It was hard to go. I just had COVID and was recovering and no longer contagious, but pretty weak and brain fogged. And I was really feeling vulnerable because, being at that time, 47-year-old woman, like kind of not knowing the language really, and going by myself for all kinds of reasons. Like it was really, I was really nervous, that like what I had come to believe as my truth might not be reflected by others. And because I fought so hard to like trust myself and trust my truth about what maybe I am and who I came from and who are my people, I was so afraid that I was just like lying to myself. But I wasn't. Some tribes here in the United States call it culture bearers, and maybe every family has them. But in my family, that was my Aunt Maija, and I'm named after her, through her, because my name means goddess of the hearth and home, and it kind of feels like a fitting name for somebody who's trying to hold on to culture in your family, and starting with me as a woman, like starting with my home and my hearth, like how my source of subsistence and nurturing of myself and my family. But you get a name like that and you have a responsibility like that, and you just don't, I didn't have much to go off of. So I went to Minnesota by myself and got to meet all the culture bearers, thousands of people coming together, taking on that responsibility and that inheritance, and I just kept talking to these women my age, and I was like, how did you do this? Like, you got these grown men wearing traditional clothing, like I grew up in a lot of white culture, and like here in the United States, and I'm like, how did you get those men to do that, because I always associate white guys with not having culture, and they're like, we told those children every Saturday that they needed to, whatever they want to do. If they want to play baseball, that was fine, but it wasn't going to happen on Saturday. And Saturday was for Latvia, and Saturday was for culture. And so the kids learned the language and songs and the dances, and started understanding what the traditional clothing was about, and then going to camps together when they're teenagers, and spending time together that way too, kind of creating this system of resilience and cultural integration, despite being so far away from their homelands. But the most powerful thing that I heard, and this is what I felt, because like everybody there was taking like this really big responsibility, was that the whole focus was on the young people. They had their own place to dance, their own like more age appropriate music, and then the more traditional Latvian music that's not for everyone, but most importantly, like they're teaching the children that the occupation by the USSR was temporary, and I guess and that it was that each person's responsibility to carry these things forward. And then what was really obvious is like you teach that, but then it's like, do you feel the benefit of that? And that's what I got to experience. Like that was a real gift, was that I got to experience the gift of that inheritance. These women and men, for all these caregivers and people, these different folks had done this for 75 years. And then I just got to go and be a participant, And so that was a real gift, and it was really inspiring, and it just made me like more resolved that like as I'm kind of learning these things. And they also told me it wasn't too late for this like 47-year-old woman like to like start learning these things again. So that gave me a lot of hope, and I'm still trying to figure out all the parts of what that means for me, but I know language is part of it, and singing is part of that, and maybe even some traditional clothing at some point, and certainly ceremony, which is one of my higher priorities right now, of traditional ceremony of the Latvians, and recovering that too, and learning that really well and doing that really well, so that all the other things can flow more naturally, as I've been taught here by First Nations people here in the United States, Turtle Island. So so that was the second story, of resilience, and and focusing on the youth, really focusing on the next generation. And I'd say the third story is around how does my identity fit in now with like what I'm recognizing as my my role, or how I find myself living here, and in California today, now what's now known as California, and lands of all over 100 something nations all over California. It's like growing up in Maija territory, Latvian County, like what does that mean to both be displaced and be here as a guest? And so that's really what I have been kind of humbled by, is like I don't even think I recognized my own displacement. Like I've been working with unrecognized nations folks for a while, and I that came from nations that had never been honored or seen or committed to in any way by our U.S. government, and then for that reason, away from their homelands and displaced other places. And it wasn't really until last winter, I'm embarrassed to say that I understood that I had always said my mom was born in a displaced persons camp. But I didn't really understand what that meant for me, that I was also a displaced person as a result. And how, had the benefits of my skin color and the the privileges of that skin color meant that I could assimilate really quickly, because I wasn't seen as other. I was seen as like this weirdo, but I wasn't seen really as other when I was a kid. So and so I was thinking about like, what does it mean to be displaced from my people's lands on my mom's side, and as a white facing woman, like in these lands, I don't. What does that mean for me? And so, I see, my work is bridge building on a personal level, is bridging that part of inside myself, that reconciliation of that inside of myself, reconciling those parts that are both occupier and occupied, displaced and also displacer, and honoring that complexity in myself, and I think that's like an opening for many, is like honoring both, that sometimes what I'll see is, when I'm working with folks that are, wanting to be in support of indigenous nations here in the United States that are not from here originally, that there's that feeling of separation, like, oh, I need to like be quiet and like listen, and all those things are really good. But like, unless you are also working on your own cultural revitalization, you're not gonna get sustained by that work, because it's not generative necessarily, because they're not your practices, and they're, it's good to like understand them and be in relation to them. But from my perspective, like we've gotta like do our own cultural recovery, so that we're not separating ourselves from each other, that we're seeing each other around our shared humanity, and honoring how long ago our own people were assimilated and colonized in our lineages, and in my case, I'm really lucky that that I only in my one lifetime I am having to overcome that assimilation and that forgetting of who I am on my mom's side. But my dad's side, it's way further back, and there's so much that has been lost in that story as a result. And so I have a lot of compassion as I say these things, because we all have it's harder sometimes for us white people to kind of figure out our shit, because it's been that much longer, that these things happen, and we don't have necessarily, even going, if you go back and do your heritage trip, which I always recommend folks doing. It doesn't, I'm like, well, someone will say, oh, well, I'm a mutt, I don't know what kind of European I am, and I'm like, well, you get DNA test will help you, and then if there's one that looks really fucking fun, do that one. Because I'm not exploring my German heritage right now, because the Latvian one was easier for me to access, and it seemed like way more fun, because they've really kept their land-based practices, and that's my part of my value framework is that's my form of spirituality is my connection to all things in the land, and learning that, and so I just invite that, that's that exploration, and the playfulness around that, because there's a lot of grief that will come with that experience. At least for me, there has been, of just the loss, of like not having those things in my life, yeah. And so like, going through the grief of that loss, and then what motivates me is the joy. That's the neuroscience of it for me, like from that Western science perspective. It's like, we're not going to change unless the thing that we want is more fun than what we're doing. So for me, that's like the carrot out there to motivate is how good it feels, when you start integrating those things into your life, and feeling that wholeness and belonging. And so the fourth thing is around the tree of peace, and the sacred tree, and I'm sharing this one because one of the things that both mostly the Latvians are really wanting, when I told them why I was interested in this work, not just for my own healing, but also in this bridge building work between the original inhabitants of all lands, and by telling my own story of like my understanding of my Latvian identity, because the Latvians are like, help support some of the connections and the threads between these different symbologies, and these different images that are used to share traditional knowledge and original instructions and natural laws, like the fabric of our existence that kind of precedes colonization, right? Like how did we do things before we did them in this kind of white way or colonized way or dominant culture way, as white people? Like, what did we do before that? And so the Latvians have these symbols, and one of them, I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so for the Latvians out there, like, again, just please be easy on me, but I think it's called Austras Koks. Anyway, if I pronounce that wrong, let me know, because I'm learning. Like, I only know like 20 words in Latvian right now, so but anyway, Austras Koks is a tree, like it's sometimes described as like the tree of life, or it's past, present, and the future, and I have that as a necklace, and I have different symbols of that I wear on me. It's also it's built into the logo for Matriarch Makeover. My way of describing like this process I've been going on is my Matriarch Makeover, but that's the logo too. My trademark, I guess it's called. Anyway, but Austras Koks, and the connection to here is that almost every peoples has a tree of life, and from my experience and my learning about this symbol in Latvian, the Latvian ways, is that it's the connector, it's the peacemaker, it's a physical symbol. The tree is a physical symbol of our interconnectedness with each other, and the image of a tree has been with me a long time. I like to use tree metaphors because I grew up in the woods, maybe, or just because it makes sense. But then the sacred tree of life, is in many cultures, and some people know, in some indigenous traditions here in the United States or Turtle Island, it's known, that the tree is itself the medicine wheel, and but not in all nations, is my guess, but in some, and so that Austras Koks, that image, the Latvians put these symbols on everything, and the symbology is it's on the traditional clothing, and there's so many different symbols that represent this greater wisdom, and so that one is the one that I carry, you know, as my reminder about what does it mean to bridge build, and also like my source of hope and inspiration, which is that you know, that our original instructions are all of our birthright and our responsibility, you know, and that, you know, as we can kind of learn these, you know, learn how our own people's practices, how they work, and, you know, how does it look to live our lives along with, you know, based on those practices, then there's that greater hope for connection, interconnection with all beings, and you know, on a more, you know, physical plane level, like, you know, with you know, the people of the lands you find yourself living on and working on, and that feeling of separation can go away a little bit while still honoring the difference, and honoring what it means to not have these lands be, you know, your traditional homelands. They're somebody else's, and that's really a wonderful opening for me, you know, to keep understanding, you know, how do I spend my energy and my time, you know, is by doing both, trying to do them equally, not always at the same pace, not like exactly 50-50, but just trying to hold both of those activities like present on a daily basis. And I honestly, I've been neglecting the Latvian part for a while, because at least the way my mom taught me, it's like, if someone's not asking you questions, then you shouldn't talk. And she wasn't a big explainer, you know. She wasn't like a teacher. I mean, she was a teacher, but when we were at home, she didn't explain things. She just showed through her actions. She wouldn't analyze the shit out of things like I do, you know. I went to, you know, law school, and I learned how to analyze everything. And my dad was a teacher, you know, in community college, and so he analyzed the shit out of everything. We had lots of fun, like, intellectual conversations, but that wasn't my mom. My mom was just modeling through her actions, you know, what she was about. So I was a little uncomfortable when I started talking about this stuff, because my mom hadn't modeled that, and I didn't grow up around anyone that modeled that. But as I have come to understand, you know, I understand now that I can't suppress my voice anymore. You know, that you know, I don't want to pass from this earth without saying these things, and because it's, you know, it's my life, and, you know, just like everybody's life, like, we each deserve to tell our own story, you know, and like my friend this morning said, you know, this, you know, elder, and, you know, that I'm learning from, he's like, you know, it doesn't matter, leave, you know, turn off, push, you know, close the window on, you know, your YouTube if you don't like it. But for the rest of you all, you know, we all deserve to tell our story, and then in ways that's, you know, imperfect is perfect, you know. We're unfinished business here, and we will probably be during this lifetime, and so I thank you for taking the time to be with me today for this share, and I'll say that, like, as I think about how we examine, you know, putting back the pieces of culture together, that's something that I am sharing more about, you know, what I call the essential ingredients of culture, as I'm going through my own cultural revitalization, so far away from my mom's homelands, and having not even really pursued my father's, like, you know, what does that look like? And, you know, I've come to believe that if we can integrate those essential ingredients of culture into our life, you know, that is the act of colonization. Decolonization is to integrate all those essential ingredients to living a whole, fulfilling, and interconnected life. And then when we do so, you know, we get that greater sense of well-being, which really support, our mental and emotional and physical and spiritual parts of ourselves. And so that's for me what, I'll probably speak about next. But in the meantime, just really thankful to get to share this today, even if it's like for one person or just for myself, really, really glad to get to put this out into the world. My heart feels better, and and I just send my big love out to whoever's listening to these words or watching this, that that you're not alone, that you matter, that your story matters, and that we all deserve and need healing, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we count our blessings and see the ways that we can really help lift everybody else up and lift up the relations of those people in our lives whose lands we're on, who've gone through these challenges, and that we invest in our own healing, but we're also investing in each other's, and that we're really, someone called it a potlatch, a tribe up in the Northwest, and I don't know which one, but that idea of redistribution, of getting enough to be sufficient, in our lives, but then to share that love with others. So, if you've met me at something that's related to the Healing and Reconciliation Institute, or something on my personal level, I just say hello to you, and invite you to join me in the different ways that you're doing this already in your own lives. And for my family and friends out there, I love you, and just appreciating you all. All right, be well.